He's the legal closer who turns real estate chaos into calm. He's an attorney every investor should know. And I'm Milton Ali.
I'm Hampton and
and we want to welcome you to the Investor Tribe podcast.
Late night grind, got the cash in the flow. Flipping these dreams, what's the portfolio grow? Brick by brick, stacking wealth in the zone. Investor Tribe, obs where the hustle is home.
What happens when a deal hits the table and all chaos breaks loose? Our guest today, Trevor Klines from Limestone Title, has seen it all. You're going to hear some good stories today on the Investor Tribe podcast.
We want to welcome to the Investor Tribe podcast, Trevor Klines. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
He's already part of the tribe. He's
part of the tribe. Yes, he's part of the tribe. However, he's never been on the podcast. He's so busy closing and doing all the cool things.
He's got a closing today too.
Yeah, I know. He's like, we don't want to. He's like, I gotta go.
Big commercial closing.
Yes, right. Yeah, big time. You know what I'm saying? And so,
literally residential closings and commercial closings, eventually, even big time commercial closings. They do it all.
So what we want to do is, we know that you are an attorney with Limestone, and you're doing 1,000 closings all the time, and you got a lot of stuff going on. Can you just help us understand, what's changing in the Louisville, Kentucky market that investors should notice?
Well, I think the market's shifting, right? I think you guys know that, being in that end of it. It's becoming more of a buyer's market. So anytime you have that going on, you have changes in how contracts are written, addendums that are written. So you just got to be aware of that. You got to know what you're drafting up for your client, even though most of them are pre-printed. And I think what we try to preach to agents that we work with is make sure your client knows what they're signing. Make sure that they know the deal that they're committing to. I give you a recent example. Had a client reach out to me a few days ago, and they had a buyer that was under contract, but it was contingent on the sale of their home. So they had the contingency addendum through GLAR signed and executed. Well, the gentleman, and it was a cash offer on his new home. And the gentleman, in the meantime, lost his job. So the guy selling and wanted to buy lost his job. And now all of a sudden he doesn't want to buy this new place. And he's actively getting offers on the place that he was selling that was the contingency. Well, part of that form reads that you have to market your property in good faith. So I think he was thinking originally, well, as long as I don't sell my house, I'm good. That's my contingency. If I can't sell it by whatever date it was, then I'm out of my purchase contract. And agent calls me and says, hey, we're actively getting good offers. These are legitimate bona fide offers and sales price and everything like that. Is my client liable for anything if they don't execute it? And of course, we don't do the litigation end, but I know enough to tell you that, you're getting into that negotiating good faith part of that addendum.
Right.
I said you need to call your client back and make sure to go back through that with them and make them understand that good faith is a binding part of that contract. So if he's getting offers that are, full price or close and not even negotiating them or trying to get it under contract, I think he could be liable for breach of that contract, which is, the damages, I couldn't tell you what they're going to be because they're not going to be calculated until it's all said and done. But, again, don't do litigation, but potentially the agent's commission. If the guy has to sell the property for less, the gentleman he's buying from, if he has to put it under contract, sell it for less, I could see that being part of damages, holding costs, all types of things. So, unfortunately, he had a cash offer in, so he didn't have a contingency on his purchase to get out for financing because if he lost his job, he wouldn't have been able to be financed on the new one, so he didn't have an out there. So, at the end of the day, I think he was, I don't know how it shook out, but from what I understand, last conversation with the agent I spoke to was that he was going to just go ahead and go through with it and buy his new house. So, I think making sure your clients know what they're signing, I think that's a big part of it. In the investor piece, I think just knowing the contracts that you're putting in front of people. I can't tell you how many times I see new investors that bring us contracts and however they're structured, whether it's an assignment or A to B and B to C.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and that's fine. They're all legal transactions, but I've gotten so many of them that don't line up, and I'm like, guys, you don't even have a binding contract here. You don't know what you've written. I know what you think you've written, and I think everybody's on the same page, but the way it's drafted doesn't make sense. Doesn't hold water. So I think if you're going to get into the investment game, especially, know your forms and know what you don't know. Know when it's time to call somebody else that does it more than you, or call an attorney you work with. Don't do what you don't know how to do. Right? I mean, making deals is a great art, and there's not a lot of people that can do that. Contracts form, that's a different art, and some people are better at that than they are to making deals. So make sure you have your resources. Make sure you have colleagues and mentors and things like that can help you. Make sure you have attorneys that can help you. Make sure you've got your resources in place, especially if you're new to the investment game. I'm sure you've run into that in lots of transactions.
Hey there, I'm Gary Settle with Supreme Lending. With 20 plus years in the banking and financing industry, I'm here to help you accomplish your dreams with respect to buying a home, a primary residence, a vacation home, or an investment property. You can come to me with confidence and know that I can find the best thing to fit your needs. So, how do you connect? Call me. My cell phone number is 502-298-1356. Also text that number, 502-298-1356, Monday through Sunday. Let me help you accomplish your goals and your dreams.
I've heard some horror stories of people that have tried to do closings at their own kitchen table, or they're buying a property that's inherited, or someone's bought on some crazy land contract and it wasn't recorded, and trying to track out who actually owns this, who has the right to sell this property. I know there's a lot of reasons to hire a title company, so you guys can do those searches and protect the buyer and the seller. But what are some of the crazy or title issues, or I'm sure you've seen a lot.
I have
But
seen
even
a
as
lot.
so to kind of bring everybody else in, what we do as investors is we enter into agreements with as buyers. We find sellers when we enter those agreements. What you're saying to all of us here and the tribe is, look, know what you're putting in front of others. And if you're uncertain, call professional help, call an attorney and get some help. And that's what I'm hearing you share right now. That's kind of because, we know the business, but for those that may not, be in the business, we just want to be able to help them understand what's going on.
Absolutely. I mean, you guys are mentors to other people. I mean, if you can't reach an attorney, call somebody else that does it, that knows the contracts better. Know your forms. Before you go out there, know your forms. Know what you're putting in front of the people, and make sure it's clear to them. Because, look, if they're going to make a deal with you, they're going to make a deal with you.
Yeah.
If they make a deal with you that they don't know the deal, that's when it blows up before closing, right? And everybody's got their stuff lined up. They've got workers lined up. They've got money they're going to make on the deal lined up, and then 2 days before closing,
And they got their shoes picked out from the closing check. they know exactly what they're going to be buying. They got the money spent.
Yeah.
And here it is. You're telling them like,
we're the ones that have to send the settlement statement out, which has the actual numbers on it, right? So you work a deal with somebody and they don't know what that looks like in numbers form. If you're not explaining that to them properly, I've had a lot of deals where everything's hunky-dory, everybody's getting along, can't wait for this to close, and we send out that settlement statement, and sure enough, the person selling that house says, well, what's all this? I thought I was walking with the sales price, or you know what I mean? And
what do you mean I have to pay off my mortgage?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's just, it's wild, but I think I don't know. I wasn't involved in the conversations that struck those contracts up, but I have an idea of how they were struck up, and it wasn't explained to them properly. Right. And I don't think that these people would have not gone through with the deal had it been explained up front and said, hey, you got to pay your tax prorations. You're going to have some closing costs on your end. Here's what your bottom line. Here's what your check's really going to look like. We're going to have to pay off any liens on the property, things of that nature. Explaining that to them, just getting them prepped for it so that when we send out numbers, a few days before closing, nobody's looking at it like, what is all this? I had no idea. I thought Milton was buying this house from me for $50,000. I was walking out with $50,000.
Right.
So
there has to be some explanation.
As simple as tax prorations, which people understand by the time, but even when you're going through that contract, hey, this tax proration section means in Kentucky, the tax bill comes out at the end of the year. If it's before that end of the year, 4 months before the end of the year, you're going to be paying me as the buyer credit for January 1 through the closing date. That's going to be debited from your bottom line. That's just you simply paying your portion of taxes. It's not me trying to take money from you, but that's the way the contract reads. People say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And if you explain it to them a month before closing, when they get the settlement statement, they're going to look at that number and they might not remember right away. But when you say, hey, remember when we talked about that tax proration? Here's what it is.
It's not a surprise. It's not a kick in the teeth. I mean,
Right.
And it shouldn't,
And that's a little plug for us. One of our technology things is we have a seller net sheet on our website. You can go to our website at limestonetitle.com. You can go on there and there's a little section, I believe, says get a quote, and you can do a seller net sheet where you can plug in a sales price. As long as you have the previous year tax bill, which is PVA information, right? You
Right.
get that. You can plug in the previous year tax bill. It would plug in our title fees, and you can tell them like, hey, look, these are average title fees. We're kind of right in the middle of the board there. You're going to be paying an attorney somewhere to do this closing. Anything, mortgages, hey, if you know your mortgage balance, let's plug that in. And it will print you basically a settlement statement that you can show these people while you're going out there. And it's if you have an iPad or something, and it'll email it from the website. You can say, hey, look, we just went through this. Here's what your check shows them what their check is going to be, how they arrive at the check. You can email it to them and say, okay, that's if I bought it for 50 grand, here's what it looks like. If you sold it for 60 grand, here's what it looks like. You can plug in agent commissions, right? So you can do that piece and say, look, if I listed it at this price with these commissions, this is what your bottom line would be. If I had an investor buy it without agents, take out those agent commissions. Here's what your bottom line would be.
That's nice. That's a nice.
It's a
tool.
really cool tool.
That is a great tool. That's a great tool.
Yeah, and it makes things easier to you know what to expect. And
Yeah.
one thing else, one of our sponsors, Bespoke Marketing, they kind of have the same belief. Running a business shouldn't be hard, so you shouldn't have to be a brand strategist, the actor, the editor as well. So our friends at Bespoke Marketing can help you look great while doing what you do best. BespokeMarketing.org. Bespoke Marketing connections, tailor-made.
And so, what are some of the more challenging title issues you have to encounter nowadays?
Well, it's, every deal is different. I think when you're talking about a cookie cutter neighborhood, with a plat map and everything like that, that's generally a pretty easy transaction. You start getting out into the outer counties, things like that, and you have meets and bounds descriptions, and you have properties that have been sold off. And when I say that, I mean it starts as a big piece of property, and then 30 years ago, Grandpa sold 4 acres to Uncle Joe, and so now the property is this amount, and kind of tracking through that can be difficult.
And the deed says okay, so where the goat gate was,
The northernmost oak tree.
the northern, yes, the third tree on the right is where Grandpa's land ended and where Uncle Joe's land began.
Yeah.
How do you navigate those types of
situations? I tell people, get yourself a new survey. Spend the money.
Gotcha.
Nobody wants to do it, but you spend the money. If you're going to buy that kind of land, get yourself a new survey. Especially in investment deals, you don't have survey coverage on your title insurance policy. Meaning, if it's an investment property, it's not primary residence. On a primary residence, you can buy an enhanced policy that gives you survey coverage, which is basically coverage against property line disputes. But if you're buying land, if it's investment, anything like that, that coverage is not on there. So if you bought it and then all of a sudden the neighbor comes over and says, hey, no, actually this 600 feet belongs to me, I'm putting a fence up right now. That's not anything a title insurance company is going to defend you for. So I recommend getting a survey. I even tell people, look, if you're going to put up a fence in a neighborhood, get a survey. Because if you don't, you're not going to have any grounds.
There's going to be no problems until the fence goes up.
Right.
It always happens when you want to put a fence up.
Or I've talked to my neighbor and he's cool with it. Well, great.
Right.
When he goes to sell his house and that new buyer comes in and does their own survey and says, hey, I'm buying this house and your fence is on my property by a foot. So before I close, I'd like to have you move that for me. Right. And so they try to save, $400 or $500 on a survey that winds up costing them, I don't know how much it is to move a fence, but I know it's not $400 or $500. Right. So it's just, that would be the issue resolution there. Get yourself a survey. That way you're protected. Everybody's clear when you go to closing.
You also talked before in the class, about the importance of title insurance, and that's one of the other policies that you pay a premium once and it covers you for as long as you own that property. So what exactly is
He
title
was
insurance?
one of the instructors in Flip Savvy.
Yes.
So this was so
And I was
cool.
listening.
He was listening. You were listening in class.
Yes, because I like the fact that you pay it one time, you never pay it again, it lasts forever. So the longer you own the property, the more better of a deal you got. It can protect you from major title insurance. But what is title insurance?
So title insurance covers you against a claim, covers you for a claim against your title. People have interest in land all different ways. Probably.
What's a claim against a title? So let's
say
really break this down.
So I'll give you the general example, one that was in our office not that long ago that I think is easy for everybody to understand. Let's say Hampton buys a piece of property, buys his house, and at some point, one of the sellers, whether it's Hampton's seller or the previous seller, inherited the property, right? When property's inherited in Kentucky, it can be handled through probate if there's a will, or you can take it to probate and do it that way, or you can have an affidavit of descent. In both of those situations, you're relying on some honesty, is what I would say. So when you open up probate, and I don't do a ton of probate law, right?
What will be an affidavit of descent?
Okay, so an affidavit of descent, if you die without a will in Kentucky, your property goes to your heirs at law by operation of law. The affidavit of descent is the document that you record in the clerk's office that shows who owns that property. So let's just say, Milton, God forbid this ever happens, but you pass away, your property is going to be owned by your heirs. One of your heirs, in order to get that documented with the county clerk, to get it on public record, you can't just say, well, Milton owned this property and it's still in his name and he died, so we know the owners are, your kids, right? Like, well, no, how's somebody that wants to buy that property know the owners of the kids? How do we convey title? Who signs on behalf of your property when you pass away? So the affidavit of descent is a document that can be executed by one of the heirs that says, yes, I'm one of the legal heirs of the deceased person, and here are all the other legal heirs that are entitled to this property. And I'm swearing that that's the only heirs at law, and we're recording it, and then that actually vests title in the clerk's office into the heirs' names. So the example that I had in our office was we had a refinance closing come up, and they closed the purchase elsewhere, and the title company that closed the purchase did a fine job. They did their due diligence, but they had vested title that way in an affidavit this was probate. Same thing with probate. When you open probate, you just sign for a judge. Here's all the heirs at law, right? And I'm swearing,
right.
I'm swearing as the executor administrator that that's it. Well, they don't do ancestry.com searches or anything when you're opening up probate. They take the word of the person because they're swearing under penalty of perjury.
Right.
They're going to do it. So essentially, this guy bought a property a couple of years ago. It was in here. It was a probate deal, and there was 2 sisters listed on the title. Come to find out, there were 2 brothers that were never named in the probate action. So there was actually 4 kids to this heir. The 2 sisters did probate and never mentioned the brothers. So
How convenient.
yeah, how convenient, right? And you know what's happened. The sisters already spent the money, right? So that's going to be gone. So we dug up the brothers. We had 2 brothers. They're both still alive. And they said, oh, yeah, that was our parents' house. I actually didn't know it sold. That's fantastic. So these 2 brothers owned essentially half of this guy's house, right? So the house is worth a little over $200,000, right? And so he was smart and he bought owner's title insurance. So what did the title insurance company do? They reached out to the 2 brothers, wrote them a check, had them convey their interest right over to this guy, and this guy didn't have to lift a finger, didn't have to employ an attorney, anything like that, because he bought a policy that probably cost him $1,500 at closing. I don't know what it cost him because it's all based on sales price, but that's a common, not super common, but that's an issue, and I think one that's easy to understand. And thank goodness this guy bought owner's title insurance, because had he not, he would have had to pay these guys $80,000, $90,000, whatever their value was worth to actually own his property.
So what if, so to make this really short, if an investor is assigning a contract and owns the property for 5 minutes, you still recommend title insurance.
So I think what you're talking about is a simultaneous close, where they're buying it and selling it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anytime you put yourself in the chain of title, buy title insurance.
Have that title insurance.
As an investor, you know better than anybody. I'm not a tax professional, but as an investor, the cost is a write-off to you anyway. So you're not paying 100, by the time tax dollars are considered, it's not as much as you would. But if you're putting yourself in that chain of title, buy title insurance. I think you could have every title attorney in the city of Louisville in here, and they would tell you that on their personal transactions, they buy title insurance. And their attorney
buy title insurance, buy title insurance. Or don't do the simultaneous close and do an assignment. Then you can.
exactly.
That's true.
Keep
Yeah,
yourself.
that's true.
That can be
Well, this episode is brought to you by Surepoint Equity. They're a leading hard money lender. And Surepoint is the go-to partner for real estate. And visit surepointequity.com to learn more and get funded fast. What do you see as common investor pitfalls? Like what are investors missing? What are they doing that is not that you're seeing at the closing table or in the chain or of the transaction that they can be better at?
It's gotten better, but I think they're not doing their due diligence when they're going out to meet with the people that own the property, right? They don't know who they're speaking to. First thing is pull your deed. It's all public record. It's all
Right.
PVA. You can get on there and get a deed to any property in any county if you need to. Make sure whoever you're talking to is on that deed, right? If they're not, you're going to start asking questions. Well, why am I talking to you? Because you're not on title to this thing. Inherited property. I mean, when the wholesaling thing got really big, I had multiple contracts brought to my office, signed by one person. And I think one transaction, we ran a property search and found out, it was a heir situation, but it was owned by 11 different people. And we had a contract signed by one person. So you don't even have a valid contract at that point. You have their interest, under contract. So I think do your due diligence, know what you know what you don't know, but pull your deed. If the person you're talking to is the only person on that deed, you're probably in pretty good shape there, right? If there's another person on that deed, if there's a wife on that deed, hey, is your wife going to be able to sign? Because she needs to sign this contract. Well, oh no, I've been divorced, or we got divorced years ago. That was all settled in our divorce. Well, again, there's a little caveat to that, is if there's not a deed executed conveying that ex-spouse's interest back to the current spouse, it doesn't matter what's in the divorce paperwork. For title purposes, we'd still need a signature from that ex-spouse. I think I told you guys.
Contentious sometimes with restraining orders.
I had a situation with that come up, and the guy was selling his house. He'd been divorced for about 10 years. He wrote his wife, a $30,000 check at the divorce to, have her convey the interest, and the attorneys put it in the divorce settlement agreement, but they didn't draft up the quitclaim deed to convey his ex-wife's interest back to him. So we get, a couple weeks before closing, I'm like, hey, your wife's still going to have to, well, no, that was all taken care of. I said, well, sir, there's no deed. They told you that you needed to get a deed executed. You didn't do that. So now we have to track down the ex-wife, and she had some issues and was kind of, I hate to say this, she was living, I think, in her parents' garage. And we tracked her down, and I called her and went to meet with her. I said, hey, I'm here. You agreed to do this? She said, oh, I know exactly why you're here, but I'm not signing a thing. And so I called this guy and said, hey, she's not going to sign. He goes, what do I do? I said, you're going to have to call your divorce lawyer, get this back on the docket, do all that. And that can take months. This guy's supposed to close in a week or two. And he said, what are my other options? I said, you got to convince her somehow to sign this deed. Well, the story got interesting. So he comes up with a number. I think it was around $10,000. He's going to pay her to sign the deed. So he calls me a couple of days. He goes, oh, well, I got to do it. I said, yeah, you got to do it. And you talk to your divorce lawyer after this if you want to try to get that back from her somehow. Come to think that she didn't probably have that money to give back. So he does that. And I told him, I said, have him come in here. We'll give her the check. And he said, oh, okay, I'll call her. And so he calls her, and he calls me a couple of days later. He says, okay, she's willing to sign the deed now. Can you go meet her? I said, yeah, I thought we were going to do this in the office. You bring a check. He goes, no, I took care of all that. She's now staying at one of these hotels over here off Blankenbaker. And I knew immediately. I said, oh, now she's checked into a hotel. I know exactly what's happened. He gave her a check. We don't have to sign a deed. I knew exactly what the next step was going to be. He said, so can you go meet her? She's in room 3, whatever. Right? Go over there, knock on the door. She doesn't answer. I can't get a hold of her. I call him back. I said, but I don't know how to explain this to you, but she did not answer. We needed her to come to the office. I'm doing you a favor, trying to help you out. So, oh, goodness, what do I do now? I said, I think you know what you have to do now. And so, sure enough, another $10,000 check later, came to my office, signed the deed. So, that's a scary story from a personal standpoint. But you said what are the pitfalls? Those are the pitfalls. That's the most common. Know who you're dealing with. Know who you're actually putting the property under contract with. You don't want to spin your wheels, spending time meeting with people, getting a deal negotiated, and then not even have the signatures you need to convey title.
Right. We've seen some crazy things with titles and people trying to sell me a house that they don't own, and then show the deed. We need the signature. We need Janet's signatures. Janet's I'm her power of attorney. Okay, we have to send that over to me or send it over to the title company. Attached to the contract. Well, she just said I could sign for it. It's like we need a legal document showing that. We can't just take your word for it because we don't know who you are. And if Janet said that, and where's Janet? Is she competent? You can't just sell her house because you're not on the deed.
Yeah.
Well, my friend told me I could, or Janet told me I could. Where's Janet now? Why can't Janet just sign? You want to stay away from those.
So that's one of the favors that Google and social media hasn't done for us. There was a big, I call it like the TikTok investor craze, right? During COVID, TikTok gets huge, and everybody's a real estate investor, and everybody's giving advice on there. And I think a lot of it was good, but there was a lot of bad advice, and you had a big flood of investors and wholesalers, flipping contracts. And look, I get it. I'm all for make money, but you got to know what you're doing, and that's why I say partner up with people, right? Partner up with people. Go to classes. Go, take the investor trap class. Take Flip Savvy. Learn some stuff before you just get out in the field and waste your time. You're gonna get a lot of value out of stuff like that. That's gonna save you time, money, and effort when you're actually going to try to negotiate these deals and make money.
Yeah, we wanted to, before you go, what we wanted to do was just ask you about the subject to game right now. I think that's something, there's whole organizations doing it.
Yeah.
Right? There's it's pretty hot and people have been doing it for the last few years. I do know that there's been some tension with that. Can you, and we talked about this offline, but, can you just kind of help us through that and just kind of give us your thoughts?
Yeah, it's something that I understand the transaction. I think it's a totally legal transaction. I think it's a private transaction, but I think no matter who you are in the transaction, whether you're the buyer or the seller, you got to know what you're getting involved in. Essentially, what you're talking about is a loan assumption where you're buying a property or selling a property, and somebody else is, and it's not really, it is an assumption in some ways. Somebody else is actually saying, I'll make your mortgage payments for you so they can keep that lower interest rate. But in the subject to situation, nobody's telling the bank, right? So I'm going to use...
Oh, there's that.
There's that, right? So which causes some pitfalls, right? So most mortgages, that once the property's deeded away, or the person that signed the note has no interest in the property from a title standpoint, they can call up that note immediately due unpayable. So if you're going to get involved as a buyer, be ready for that. It doesn't happen very often because usually, as long as lenders are keep getting their mortgage payments, they don't care. They're not asking any questions. They're not looking into these transactions, right? But if you're a buyer, you better be ready to finance that with another bank very quickly or be able to pay for it in cash and pay off the bank, right? As a seller, understand that you are deeding your property away and that debt is still on your credit report. There's nothing you can really do that I'm aware of. Maybe there's some new mechanism that I'm not aware of, so I don't want to get called out there, but from my understanding, that debt is still in your name. You are the one that signed the note to that bank. If payments get missed, it's going to hit your credit. If payments get missed and it goes to foreclosure, it's going to be in your name, and that person signed with you is going to probably be named as a co-defendant, but it's on you. So you have to know what you're getting involved in. Now,
so that's a cautionary tale.
That's a
right?
cautionary
So there's
tale.
a cautionary tale. And so what we want to do is thank you so much for coming out today and hanging out with us.
I appreciate
and we know that we can reach out to you.
Yes.
And we can call and we can reach out and
happy to answer any questions. Happy to help you. You can always call. I'll give you office and my cell. So office is 502-632-2277. You can always call my cell. My office phone rings to my cell anyway. So it's 502-709-1354. But happy to answer questions, help you however I can.
You guys
let me know.
do closings in Kentucky and Indiana.
So Kentucky and Indiana, we're getting ready to open. Indiana office should be open in about 2 or 3 weeks. Very
Wow,
exciting.
congratulations.
Right. And
Yeah.
so some things we talked about are based on Kentucky law, Indiana law. So consult your attorneys. Wasn't legal advice. All the
Correct.
disclaimers. You know, we're not tax advisors. We're not accountants. We're not attorneys.
We're podcast
Yeah, we're
hosts.
podcasters.
We're podcast hosts. I'm a real estate agent. He's an investor,
Yeah.
right? And Trevor's the attorney. But look. I mean,
Yeah.
But we also want to shout out our socials as well. So reach
That's
out to
right.
Trevor for the legal matters and closings. Reach out to us for your real estate needs, questions, if you want a topic you want us to cover. So we're on Instagram, Facebook, X, and I feel like I'm forgetting one. aren't I?
Spotify and YouTube,
Spotify,
right?
soon.
We're everywhere
At INV Tribe.
on everything.
Yes.
So we're everywhere. And I'm Milton Ali,
I'm Hampton Skurlock.
and we'll catch you on the flip side of the Investor Tribe.
The Investor Tribe podcast is brought to you by The Investor Tribe, all rights reserved, featuring Hampton Skurlock and Milton Aldi, executive producer Drew Cookenmaster, produced and distributed by Bespoke Marketing.